Hola, my name is Ruby Lopez Harper. My pronouns are she, ella. I identify as a woman and Latina. I don't have a feeling about being called Hispanic or Chicana, but if I had a preference and a choice and an opportunity, I absolutely prefer to be called Mexicana. Please don't call me white. My family is from Michoacan, Mexico, and I grew up in Bellflower, California. I speak English, Spanish, Chisme, and Spanglish. I've been learning a little bit of ASL, and this is what looking bilingüe means to me.
Amazing. So I want to start off, since this is a season about parenthood, tell us about your kids, and then we're going to get into you because obviously that's really important.
Oh, my kids. My kids are magical. I have an 11-year-old boy, and an 11-year-old girl. They're twins, and a 15-year-old boy. All of my kids are biracial. So, my older boy, his dad is white, and the twins, their dad is white. He's my third husband. Um, and it's been really fascinating to kind of watch them. We've never said like you are this. We've said you're all of these things, but how you get seen by the world, it's been an interesting part of the conversation. So, all three of them feel pretty comfortably identifying as Mexican, even though they understand that they're biracial.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And actually, you mentioned something, well, something we have in common. We are both in interracial relationships, and we both have biracial children. So, can you tell me a little bit about like that impact and how you bring your ancestry into your kids' lives?
Oh my gosh, yeah. What's been interesting is I've really been kind of unapologetically creating spaces where they have an opportunity to learn about their Mexican ancestry. I think because it is a really clear line, like I still have a lot of work to do to kind of build the path back, but we originate from Michoacan, Mexico, so I can pull food, and I make a lot of, like, over the holidays I made tamales de harina and I made atole de Jamaica, which are two dishes that are specifically from the area that we originate from. And my husband's white, and I think he's Irish. And so it makes it harder. Like it makes it harder, right? Like I feel like that's one of the challenges that I've realized, kind of moving in white spaces is that they don't seem to have as clear a path to be able to bring that cultural connection forward. So, when we eat potatoes, we laugh about being Irish, or these are not the food of my people. Like that happens at our
Yeah.
and so I think that's kind of been the easiest path for us. And music, we listen to a lot of Spanish music in the car, but contemporary music as well, and from different kind of Latin, Central America origination. So it isn't just Mexican music, but it's been an interesting journey to try to create that space for them. Holidays, we try to honor holidays. We talk about significance. Like I did an ofrenda one year on the mantle of the fireplace, like real low key. And then the kids really liked it, so we just left it up. And so now they call it, that's where the ancestors are. The ability to stay connected, the importance of the connection, right? That like we're going to be having a transition in our location coming up in the next 2 years, and helping the children see that, like, even though we're moving, there's still this wonderful connection that you've made with folks, and you can maintain that. And it doesn't have to be proximity. It's about that, like, heartstring that you tie
Yeah.
to people. And the ability for our culture in particular to have a very specific way to express that, and to
Yeah.
be proud of it, and to center it and focus it and honor it and pass it, right? It's the
Yeah.
passing. I love the idea of you die twice, right? The one time when your physical body is done, and then the last time someone speaks your name. And I
Oh,
think
wow.
that's just so important, right? It's part of what we honor, right? So like My grandfather still is with us because I don't forget about him, and my grandmother in the same way. Like we just talked recently, my son was a little gloomy and, oh, what's wrong, honey? Well, I miss Grandma Lucy. Oh, well, you could just talk to her. I
Yeah.
know, but it's not the same. I'm like, no, it's not gonna be the same, but she's still with us. I know, I'm just missing her today. And I'm like, okay.
Whenever Dia de los Muertos comes around, and again, it's not something that my family celebrated, of course. The idea that they go to the cemetery and chill there and have picnics and have other things that I'm not even aware of, I'm like, oh, that's so nice. I might have less trauma around death if we were
If
raised.
you have this kind of natural path
It's like,
to talk
oh,
about,
yeah,
right?
of the any images that I see or videos that I see of people celebrating Dia de los Muertos is this bright, vivid, just beautiful expression of continued love, just in a different way. Um,
Yeah, and I would even say it doesn't, I mean, there are, I think, some cultures that move it even farther, right, into more of a, I mean, it's celebratory. I don't know that I would ascribe the same level of that. I think it's very honorific and it's very practical. And I think it's very, like you said, colorful, celebratory in a different way, that it's not like a party, but it's definitely a remembrance and honoring, and and I've been fascinated by that distinction as well, that like, where, well, man, we know, right? It the colonizing of the practice that like this is how you mourn, this is how, but it isn't. It's one way to do it. And I really have appreciated the ability to have another way to do it. Um, and that I don't have to justify the connections that I have to the people that have died. Um, so I have two friends on my ofrenda that touched me. And the kids, they're part of the ancestors. They
yeah,
don't, the kids don't know.
well, in the same way that they're called aunts or uncles sometimes in our families, even if they're not actually blood related. That's how I would see
Right. Exactly.
when you were talking about proximity to your children, and you said it was like you're closer to the splash zone, like, right, you're like closer to the actual you know
Yes. Well,
cultural bringing splash zone, more
right,
than your kids are. So
right.
could you explain a little bit about what that means, and then give us a little bit insight into how, despite being closer to the splash zone, you were still
I still
impacted by,
struggle.
yeah, you were still impacted by assimilation.
Yeah, well, so it starts with assimilation, right? That like during a time in our country, proximity to whiteness, American identifying, that was a goal, that was achievable, attainable, desirable. And whether families explicitly or implicitly embraced and moved with that in mind, it really took away from, I think, a large swath of folks like me, right? That like in our 40s and our 50s, we're still this distance that's so hard to bridge.
Yeah.
So growing up, my grandmother, I mean, as far as the history goes, she would be considered like she was the first immigrant. Her and my grandfather, they settled in East LA. And my mother went to high school, like she grew up, but she grew up kind of on the divide where I think they spoke Spanish at home. Everything at home was uh, very Mexican. But then her younger sister, her second younger sister, third younger sister, my mom was the second oldest of five, um, wanted to be a cheerleader, wanted to do that, like, and there was dissonance and tension in the family because of that. And and other structures, of course. And then, we come along and we don't speak as much Spanish in the house. We still listen to music. There are things that I remember just kind of coming into understanding that, oh, not everybody's family does this, but
Mm.
also I don't understand what it means that my family does it. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s, when I got misidentified as white, that I had a real kind of identity crisis and made a commitment that I would never not be seen not by my own devices. I can't correct how people receive me, but certainly I'm gonna show up and be myself, and myself includes a Mexican lineage and an ancestry that I'm proud of. And because of that, I've really tried to find ways to give that to my children and to pass that to them. And I know in some conversations that you and I've had over the years, that trying to find the truth and the almost the science of my origin story, right? That I can't give them that. Without it, I can't give them that. I can give them a flavor and a taste. And I feel like you wander into the fairy forest and the fog and the cloud, and then something somewhere in a light that and I think about it, it's that magical to me when I think about it, and I want them to be that enamored of it, that I want them to be that curious about who they are
Yes.
and where they came from. And my daughter recently was dealing with, some bullying and some stuff happening to her by another girl of color. And I was like, look, you need to remember that we originate from warriors, and our ancestors are giants, and you stand on their shoulders and they stand at your back, and you cannot let this will not break you. You come from tougher, deeper, stronger, fiercer stock than just your average person. And
Love that.
that's the thing that I think white supremacist culture tries to take from us, because they don't have that. And that's not something that you can uh that you can create for yourself. Like, your blood is your blood,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's yeah.
Yeah, you said, I want to go back to what you said about, when people misidentified you, and you said, I'm going to show up as my Mexican self, and then obviously pass that on to my kids, or not obviously, but for you, obviously start to pass that on to your kids. What does that change look like? So if somebody hears this, they kind of go, so the next meeting she went to, the next conversation in a mall she had, the next, you know, play date she had at her house, what did that look like? I'm gonna make sure I show up Mexican.
Yeah. So one, it's been trying to understand um the history of Mexican kind of migration, trying to be more familiar with what the story has been in the US. Because a lot of people talk about, certainly there's a lot of trauma and abuse and violence that's been perpetrated against people of color. But you don't hear a lot about the story from the brown person perspective, right? There was lynchings in Texas, hundreds of Mexican people massacred. I mean, even just going back to when Mexico became the US
Yeah.
and the border moved, all of that. And yes, things have been done, but we haven't heard as much about that story, right? And then when you think about the deep connection that we have to the labor movement in the West Coast, right? We don't hear about that. And that shaped, unionizing, that shaped and informed, and it's an important part of the culture that we don't talk about, or
Mm-hmm.
that we don't get attribution for. And so for me, it's been some of that like I have a new kind of energized commitment to social justice that wasn't a part of my growing up, that wasn't a part of my 20s, and not even a part of my 30s. Like, this has been just in the last 2 decades, something that I'm hyper aware about and deeply committed to, and I've been figuring out how to navigate it for myself, and what it means to bring that into the conversation. And so it's been that motivates me. Certainly there's imagery and iconography, and there are fashion cues that I can give to people, that when I show up, you're you're going to ask questions, and I'm inviting you to ask those questions. So my earrings today, right? They come from Oaxaca, not my region of Mexico, but it's going to start a conversation, and I'm inviting that. In the background, you see I have a Catrina. There's a joke that my nickname is La Catrina because I'm so gangster, right? Like I'm a big badass boss lady. And so
Yes,
yeah, La
yes,
Catrina, right?
yes.
And you see that like I've got very few Frida references because I have a whole like thing about the commercializing of her as an image. But when I used to have an office in an office building, I had papel picado hanging from the ceiling. My office was very dense with colorful artwork that was either inspired by or indicative of or created by Mexican artists and art forms. And so when people would come to my office, like there is no question, I am not white.
Yeah.
And you
Sorry.
know, and we feels and very traditional, like incorporating traditional clothing into my wardrobe and
Mhm.
wearing it like it's just a shirt because it is just a shirt. It's just a shirt. It's a blouse. I used to wear weepiels under my blazers with my pencil skirt and, you know, like, and my, you know, embroidered, my proudest moment was going up on stage in front of 1,000 people in my uh, embroidered sheath dress with this gorgeous blazer. And here I am. And it mattered. I
Yeah.
incorporated Spanish into my introduction. And I remember people coming up and saying, "Thank you so much. When you spoke Spanish, I felt like I belonged here." And it was like I've never seen anybody incorporate Spanish into their introduction. Like it's so rare, and thank you for that. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't be. And you can do it too. Like this is
Yeah.
we're gonna change things now. Like
Yeah. And
um
what I love from what you're saying too is that you started this journey into this reclamation of sorts later in life, but like later than most people would expect. A lot of people think that it's just Gen Z or younger folks that are like leading this, which absolutely they are doing their part. But there's also people that are saying, you know what, I might be in my 30s, I might be in my 40s, I might be in my 50s, and gosh knows there's probably people that are even older that are saying, you know what, I have ignored this, or I didn't know about this, I didn't understand this, and now is the time for reasons X, Y, and Z, or because I just feel like it, to reclaim these roots and to change the way that things
sure.
happen, which I,
And so I've been really upfront with the kids, kind of going back to the beginning, right? That because you are not white and you are not Mexican, you are always going to live in this gray space that we live in anyway because we're not white and we're
Mhm,
not black, which is really the you know kind of the dominant dissonance of the the racial conversation.
mhm,
We're not either of those, and so we sit in the middle, and because we're not either of this, we're going to sit in this weird, you are going to sit in this weird space that's even weirder than what I sit in.
question. I think this is so important in regards to your story. So you're in a situation right now, you're in a sitch where your mom and your aunt, as the eldest matriarchs of your family, are holding to their chest very closely some pretty important information about your family. So, can you share with us what that is generally? Of course, whatever you're comfortable with sharing, and why you yearn for this information, and how your life
Oh,
will change once you obtain it.
yeah.
And I'm saying once you obtain it because we're keeping it positive.
So, oh gosh. Okay, so family dynamics are a thing. And the short story is everybody seems estranged from everybody else. And in this estrangement, we have lost access to information about our origin story. And when my grandfather passed about 20 years ago, we all kind of sat down and acknowledged that like that was the end of some information we're never going to really have. And I was young. I mean, young. Yeah, I wasn't paying attention. I didn't, it wasn't the same me then.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, all right, well, moving on. And then my grandmother passed last year. And I think in this kind of rediscovery and reconnection, that journey that I've been on, I realized that like, holy cow, like there's information that I don't have access to now. And so I need to figure like, now I have more questions.
Yeah.
One, because my own father I'm estranged from. And so I don't, at one point at some early years, he said that we descended from a warrior tribe in Mexico, and that's what the people were known for. So when there was need for battlements, we were the tribe that marched, that rode the horses out
Wow.
into the fray. Oh yeah, and I was like, that makes so much sense. But I don't talk to his side of the family, so there's all that gone. And I was talking with another Latina, Yaira, out of uh Texas. I can't remember what city specific. San Antonio, Austin, San Antonio. She's amazing. But and also, so she's been on a similar journey and has also kind of hit some, like, you can only get so far because a lot of the the years that are out there, there's no documentation,
Mm-hmm.
or that church doesn't exist anymore,
Right. Yeah.
or
They won't
and
let you
so
in. They won't talk to you. Yeah.
she's gone as far as she can go.
No.
And so she's learning kind of in the similar way that, like, well, if I can't get to that, I'm going to get to this. And so for me, I can't get to the thing, so I'm going to get to the food. I can do food.
Mm.
And so recently I asked my mother for I didn't even ask for a copy. I just said, do we have grandma and grandpa's birth certificates? And why? That was all. Not even a why do you want, why? And like, because I'd like a copy of them because I'm trying to, and that was it, crickets. And I'm going to see my mom soon. We're going to have a conversation. We're also taking a trip to Mexico, the aunts, my mom and myself.
Wow.
So I'm hoping that that's going to unlock the opportunity for me to push this button again. I did talk to my mom's younger sister, who was more forthcoming with information, but was not supportive. Like, I
Mm.
was like, great, well then what does that mean? She's like, I don't know, and don't worry about it. And I'm like, that's not enough. I need more. I
Yeah.
need to know where they were born. Like, can you just tell me where they were born? And it's an ongoing dialogue. I haven't asked these specific questions. And then I got into a conversation with my husband about doing ancestry, or like a DNA. And so that's been a whole thing. And a wonderful friend of mine gifted me with an ancestry, and the
Love
little box
that.
showed up, and my husband's having all kinds of feelings about it. And so
Ooh.
it's been sitting. Um, it's just so it's a thing right now. And he doesn't understand because he doesn't have the same yearn.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because his ancestry isn't on this land. And there's kind of back to, this is my bloodline.
Yeah. This is my story. This is part of my story, part of who I am, and part of who our kids are.
Part
Um,
of who my kids are. And I want them to know when I'm gone where they came from. And not just, I was born in Columbus, Ohio, and I moved to Silver Spring, Maryland, and
yeah.
now I live wherever,
Yeah.
because that's a story they need to be able to pass,
Yeah.
because I don't want my second death.
Yeah. Oh, full circle.
Yeah. My aunt told me, I mean, everybody's confirmed that my mother's side and her mother's side is mestiza.
Hmm.
So somewhere in the way backs is the mixing following colonization,
Yeah.
which means our story goes back farther than.
Yes.
And I want to know,
Yeah.
what tribe did my family, my mother's side at least, what tribe did they originate from? Because somewhere in the way backs, it's there.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be mestizos.
Hmm.
And then with my dad, his, as far as as far as the mythology goes, they've stayed not, they didn't mix. So his lineage should be pretty straight arrow, which means I can figure that, like, and once I learn that, I feel like, okay, well, now I can speak and experience and move and convey and share and participate
Yeah.
with a level of authenticity and genuineness and wholeness that even now I don't feel, even with as much as I feel like I've done, as much as I feel like I've contributed, as much as I feel like I don't have that.
Yeah.
I don't have that. And my
Yeah.
kids won't have that. And I want them to have that.
Yeah.